Hello my friends and welcome once again to 7 True Ghost Stories from Reddit. There's nothing like a good ghost story to give you the chills. But what if those stories happen to be true? And they happen to you. Here's 7 true ghost stories from Reddit users. Tonight my uncle called my aunt while he was driving home from his family's friend's home, completely hysterical and in tears. He had been working in his friend's parents' yard, helping them with yard work while they were away. He was raking all the leaves out of their rather large yard and into their tree line behind their house when he looked up and saw a person standing not too far from him. It was his friend that had died little over a year ago. He had gotten drunk and somehow ended up being hit by a train while walking. It was ruled an accident, but some people call that into question. My uncle said that he was a white, bluish color when he saw him. He screamed and sprinted up to his car and drove off in a panic. He tried to call my aunt, frantic, but couldn't get through. In his frightened state, he dialed the number they had from over 20 years ago. He eventually realized that he had to calm down and stop trying to call my aunt, and tried to think of a reasonable explanation to tell this guy's parents while he left their yard equipment near the woods by their house. So he drove back, walked towards the woods, and froze up when his friend appeared again. The friend apologized for scaring him and asked him not to be afraid. My uncle apparently couldn't talk due to the gigantic lump in his throat and just nodded. The friend asked him to tell his parents that it wasn't their fault that he had died and that he loved them. My uncle apparently didn't say what happened after this interaction, but he called my aunt after leaving shortly after and was more calm about it, but still didn't make much sense and was sobbing. He was typically a stoic kind of guy, kind of a biker type person who's not scary, but if you didn't know him, he might be a little intimidating. He's not always serious and can joke around, but he wouldn't ever joke around about someone's dead relatives or friends, and we're all in agreement that he probably did see what he said he saw that night. The friend's parents have apparently been visiting a medium to try and contact their son because of some horrible people at their church told them his son's death was probably their fault. My uncle says he isn't sure if he should tell them yet, but I think he's going to, regardless or not. He says he's conflicted. That's about all the details I could wring out of my aunt. She wasn't supposed to tell anyone else, so I guess that's all I'm able to find out right now. I'm about to be 24 years old and I've been battling with spirits since I was 7 years old. Even though it was 17 years ago, it still feels like yesterday. It all happened on a beautiful, sunny Sunday. Everyone was out except for my mom and I. She was folding laundry in the bedroom in the back of our huge house, and I was reading a book in my bedroom in the front. Other than her TV, which I couldn't hear, there were no other electronics on in the house. Deep into my book, I started hearing this strange, raspy breathing. It was a very old house, so I thought it was just the house doing that noise, so I tried ignoring it. The more I ignored it, though, the more louder and persistent it got, till it got so loud it sounded like a megaphone in my room. Specifically, it sounded like a haggard old woman, breathing angrily. By this point, I was so terrified, I was frozen in fear, but I finally got a surge of energy, threw my book on the ground, jumped off my bed, and ran into the hallway towards my mom's room. Running into the hallway was more than horrific. We had high ceilings and stone floors, so the breathing was not only amplified, but was bouncing all over the place. It was so chaotic, I thought I was going crazy. Not only was the noise wild, but My body felt out of whack too. My sense of perception was way off. I was tripping all over my feet. Everything even looked topsy-turvy. When I finally made it to my mom's room, that's where the real horror was. She had been sitting on the edge of her fainting couch, holding a giant pile of laundry earlier, and when I ran into her room, she was passed out in the same position she had been sitting, except for she was splayed on top of the laundry, as if someone hit her in the back of the head, and she blacked out onto the laundry. I couldn't believe my eyes. I didn't know what to do, so I just jumped on her bed, forced my eyes shut, and blacked out from fear. When I woke up, I thought it was just a really horrific nightmare. There's no way this could have been real. But then I walked into my room, and the book was exactly where I threw it. I was 7 years old. I wasn't on any medication, and I definitely didn't do drugs. I didn't play the Ouija board or anything else to induce spirits. I've always been spiritual, so that's the only explanation I could think of why this started. This was the start of my ghost issues, and they would happen every couple years, though this didn't become a daily issue. My second real horror story came after something I did, sadly. This time I did play the Ouija board and got physically hurt. There's a reason they tell you guys not to play that. It's not just a silly game. This actually happened when I was around 16, so it was much later. A girlfriend and I decided to play the Ouija board and later watch TV. The game itself wasn't significant, and I can't remember if it worked or not, but later on it definitely did. We were watching TV, and I felt a quick, deep, painful burning sensation in my side that was pressed against the couch. It hurt so bad I jumped up and screamed out in pain. We had just had a flea outbreak, so I thought it was that, but I lifted my shirt and there was a claw mark with 3 deep marks and 3 very faint ones, about 6 fingers. Not only that, it was creepy and tiny claws. I myself am tiny, only 95 pounds, and my hand is rather small, but compared to this hand, it was miniature. The whole 6 fingers were about the depth of 3 of my fingers. There's no way it could have been my hand because the scratch marks were evenly spaced and there was obviously 6 separate claw marks evenly spaced miniature sized. I'd taken pictures, but they got lost when I broke my computer. I even had them on a photo bucket, but then that got mysteriously deleted. Anyway, later that day, my friend and I are in the bedroom with my door wide open. We are conversing, and my back is to the hallway while she's facing it. She's in the middle of speaking when she gets super pale and wide-eyed. I asked her what's wrong, and she says there's a huge black shadow staring at us from the hallway. It's gone when I turned around, but that didn't stop her from grabbing her purse and just running out of my house right then and there and never coming back. It was very embarrassing. After the situation, things really started getting weird around the house, but only to me, even though my dad and roommate lived there. One day, my ex-boyfriend and I were laying in bed watching TV with my comforter around my knees when I moved my leg slightly over and felt something wet. I was confused because my bed was in the middle of the room, and there was nothing around that could have made it like that. I proceeded to lift up the covers, and right there was a perfectly round, soaking, wet puddle about 1 foot in diameter. My boyfriend and I were just speechless and shocked. Earlier that day, when I opened my walk-in closet, a breeze had come out, which was strange, because I didn't have any vents or windows. My boyfriend and I decided to inspect the closet, thinking it had something to do with the wet bed. We walked over to the closet, and there was nothing there, so we walked back to my bed, and in the span of that 30 seconds, the puddle of water had completely dissipated. Not only that, it left a strange stain, almost like how oil looks when it stains and dries. So this couldn't have been water, because no matter how many times I washed these sheets, The perfectly round stain stayed. And remember, the bed was in the middle of my room and there was no water around. And my room was on the second story, so the excuse that a pipe burst and fell on my bed doesn't work. It wasn't raining either. In the same house, I experienced strange problems with electronics, even though that is a regular problem with me now still. But in this house, the TV would never be on the channel I turned it off on. This only happened to me, but was so regular I deemed it normal. My room was also the only room that received blackouts, which also happened regularly, even though there were 4 other rooms in the house. When I was home alone, my whole house actually got blackouts too. The most significant time I remember is when I was sitting in my living room home at night. The house was 2-story with a wide open plan and hallway you could see all around from the living room. Anyway, I heard this weird mechanical sound, almost like a switch got flipped and the whole house was a machine that got turned on. It was coming from the belly of the house, if that made any sense. After that noise turned on the power, it started turning on and off, even though it was pretty quick, and the whole house, it wasn't instantaneous. It started in the right side of the house and then swooshed over everything. It was the strangest blackout of my life. The lights turned back on right after, and I was so confused and shocked when it actually happened all over again. So there I was, home alone with this creepy stuff happening. A couple more things happened at that house, but those are the craziest. A couple months ago, I was making a video about this creepy video I found on BET website with Kanye at the 2015 Honor Awards. His shadow was completely upside down, and people could argue that it was the panel he was standing in front of creating an illusion, but the other 2 hosts that stood in front of it didn't get this effect, so I decided to make a video of that, and that's when things got weird. At the time, I didn't know how to record directly from my computer, so I decided to use my tablet to record the video. I didn't notice at the time, but the second I pointed my webcam at the video, it started glitching. The screen started getting distorted, and when I was speaking into my own webcam, the screen got distorted and lights started flashing. Of course, I started freaking out, and that seemed to be intelligent. It flashed whenever I reacted to it. The next day, I decided to have an EVP session, and that's when I got a loud and clear no from what sounded like a young man. I don't know what to make of these situations, but they were pretty scary. Another thing that was just brought to my attention was that when I was making a completely unrelated video, someone realized there was heavy panting in the audio background. It's very loud and clear and sounds like a young guy masturbating. It's not coming from the background in my room, though. It's very easy to tell that. I'll post the links to these videos so you guys can come to your own conclusions, and I'd like to know your theories of what's going on. Author's note: the author has put the links in the description of their story, and I will put the links into the description of this video so you can see her videos and judge for yourself. I've always liked taking bike rides down by the beach, but this particular day was just downright creepy. One day, my friend and I decided to ride down to the abandoned road, which led to the beach. The town had the entrance blocked off with concrete barriers. We stopped at the barriers because it's right in front of the train tracks, and beyond the train tracks was the road. People always tend to stop there because it's a nice chill spot to talk and watch the train ride by. While these 2 guys were chilling there, having a beer, and we pull up next to them and say what's up, since it's always rude to pass without saying hello. These guys were talking about a homeless man that we both knew that always hung out at that spot, and that we always enjoyed talking to. And I forget the homeless man's name since it's been so long, so let's just call him Bob. Bob liked to chill and have a beer like he normally does with the radio on, listening to whatever station, I don't remember. But these guys were talking about how he had died a few days prior. This kind of made me feel down because that guy was a very cool dude. He'd occasionally take a puff off a joint we'd roll and talk about his life. Well, we say our goodbyes to the guys and we cross the tracks. Across the train tracks was the abandoned road, which is all broken up, but still had all the paint markings on the ground like a normal street would have. The road led straight to the lake, which breaks off. You could still see parts of the road broken up in the water. It's a very foggy day, so it made the road look very, very spooky. As we got further down, we decided to stop for a moment and take a smoke break. I said to my friend to go through that path and pointed at a path through the trees. We liked adventures through the woods, so I thought to myself, why not? Especially on a spooky day like this. The path only made through animals going through it, so it wasn't a very clean path. We had to brush against the trees and the sharp bushes. When we got deep into the woods, we'd stop. Suddenly our hearts sank. Over the distance, in the middle of the bushes, in a clearing, was Bob. Bob is just sitting there on a fallen tree, his bike standing up right beside him. He had a beer in his hand like always and the radio on. All he was doing was just staring off into space. Crazy as I am, I tell my friend, hey dude, let's go up to him. He at first didn't want to, but I didn't believe in ghosts, so my curiosity got the best of me. I finally convinced him to come with me and we make it over to Bob. When we got to him, I noticed his eyes were just pitch black. Not any ounce of white in them. This creeped me out, but I had to make sure. I asked Bob what he was doing here. Mind you, this was the most random spot in the woods, so it didn't make sense why he would just be sitting in the middle of the woods there. He said, just having one last beer before I have to go. I said, have to go? We heard you were dead. He gave a creepy chuckle and continued to stare off into space. All I could say was, so you're really not dead, right? You're not a ghost? He gave another creepy chuckle and just kept staring off. At this point, my hairs were standing on the back of my neck. I was getting goosebumps all over. I look over to my friend and his face is all white. I took this as a let's get out of here, and we decided to rush out of the woods as fast as we could without looking back. When I got home, I looked up recent deaths in town, and there he was, Bob. That was the creepiest ghost encounter of my entire life. I don't quite remember the cause of death, but still to this day, I've never gone back. That's all the time I have for today, my friends. I hope you're having a wonderful day or evening. I'm Imori. Now, listen to the spooky tunes. Hello, my friends, and welcome once again to 7 True Ghost Stories from Reddit. There's nothing like a good ghost story to give you the chills. It's a dog barking.